Okay, so the next major thing to address is this dent here. Big problem is it's dented back here, so I think it's going to interfere with the bumper going back on, so it needs to come out. Now, a body shop would probably just cut out this damaged section and weld in a new one, and a really skilled body shop might be able to pull this dent out and smooth it back out again. Both those options cost lots of money. I don't have lots of money. So I'm going to attempt to push this dent out as best I can, try to smooth it out as best I can, and maybe in the future I'll take it to a body shop to have them just fine tune it a bit, but right now we're going to do our best at least to get this bumper to fit and make this look a little less janky. Now, it shouldn't be super complicated, but there is one body ridge right here, kind of hard to see on camera. So this is basically just a curve from here to here, except for this one body ridge. Back here it's going to get a little bit more complicated, but we'll have to burn that bridge when we get to it. Now, I'm no bodywork guy, but I do know some basics, enough to be dangerous. There's a couple ways to pull out this dent. One, like I said, is to cut it out, weld in a new one. I don't have access to another body to cut one off of, so that's out. Another one is to pull it out this way. I might have to do that, but I don't really want to, because the ways you do that is either drill holes or weld on points of this and pull it out. There's paintless dent repair techniques that pull on it, but I don't think I can do that with this rust here. But the reason why I don't want to do that is because they need a little bit more skill, and you have a higher risk of ripping the metal. Now, this is pretty thick metal, so not as much of a concern, but still, I don't want to stretch or rip it, and I don't want to drill holes if I don't have to. The next way is to go behind it and use a paintless dent repair techniques to push on it, which I might try, or hammer on it, which I'm going to try because it's probably the easiest, and since this is such an extreme dent, I'm probably going to have to do some hammering out to begin with. Now, you don't want to just smack it with a hammer as hard as you can, and it will pop the dent out pretty quick, but it's also going to stretch and warp the metal and make it really hard to get the surface smooth again. You want to just kind of tap it. And from what I've read, you kind of want to try to figure out where the damage started from, so I'm pretty sure it came this way. And tap it out from there and kind of undo the dent that way. I might have to get a pry bar back there and push it out, because there's also a support structure right here that blocks my access to some of the dent. I can get to some of it here, I can get to some of it here, but I can't hammer basically right in the middle of it here. So we'll see. I'll hammer on either side and see if that pulls it out. If not, I might need to get a pry bar back there. I guess worst case scenario, I'll have to weld some pegs on there and pull it out, but we'll see how far I get. Ignore all this stuff, it's the interior that needs to be cleaned up, but that's for another video. I'm not sure how much I'm actually doing. I can feel it moving a little bit. What I'm trying to do here is, because the dent on the outside is so big, I'm not even really trying to worry about the shape all that much. What I'm just trying to do is get it generally to go and flatten out and maybe go concave, so on the outside it's convex. And so I'm just kind of feeling along the inside, going along from where I think the dent is starting and hammering towards the high spots to just kind of push them out. If this doesn't work, I'm going to give this a few hours, because obviously I don't want to just hammer on it as hard as I can. But if I'm noticing it moving, I'll keep going. If I'm not noticing it moving after a few hours, then I'm going to switch to trying to pull it with a slide hammer. Okay, after a lot of hammering until my arm went numb, I did make some progress up here, but overall, especially down here, it's not really moving at all. I think this area here, which is right behind that support pillar and I can't hammer on it, is kind of pulling everything back. So I have welded on a bolt here, and I'm going to try to pull this out. Now, I know the proper way would be like to spot weld a little peg here and then pull it out. I don't have that equipment, so I just welded this on, I'll pull it out, and I can grind it off later. I'm not worried about the paint, because obviously. Okay, light on. So these were touching before, and now I can get my finger in there. So it seems like it's moved quite a bit. So I'm going to grind those tacks back off, weld that bolt back on, and try again. So I did that a few times, and I did end up tearing a little hole in the metal here, but that's okay, I can weld it back up after. And more importantly, if you go to the inside, I've got a big gap here now, which means that now I can get my pry bar back here. And I'm not just crowbarring this as hard as I can to push it out. What paintless dent repair guys do is they'll get a tool behind something and kind of push on it and slow pushes over and over again and kind of massage the metal out. So I'm going to try to do that now since I have a good point to pry off of with the support beam here. I can kind of just work around in there. So I'm going to stop with the slide puller for now and trying to use the pry bar to push it out a little bit. So I'm making some decent progress. I've gotten a lot of the shape back here. This was pushed in really far and it's almost back out where it should be. There's still a deep dent here, but I can probably get that out with like normal hammer and dolly work. I'm having a hard time getting it at this area here because it's not really accessible from inside the car. And there's a good crease here which is giving the dent a lot of strength, so I might have to use the pulling technique here. Worst case scenario, I might cut a little bit here just to get rid of that crease, but I'm going to try not to. I'm going to try to push it out from inside first. So what I'm doing for pushing it out from the inside, so I'm just taking various shapes of crowbar or pry bar and getting it back here and getting a good place along the frame here where it's not, well, it's not really frame, but like the support structure of the car here, where it's not going to bend as much because it's stronger here than it is here, and just kind of prying at some of the high spots on the inside. So low spots on the outside, high spots on the inside. Prying and working my way around like that slowly, like not giving a good yank, but just these little pulls, which is how paintless dent repair works. And I'm sure anyone who actually does paintless dent repair is yelling at me right now because this is barbaric compared to what they do. But it's working pretty well, same basic concept. Just these little pulls, and you can hear it creaking. It's creaking right here because this is actually twisted back from where it should be. This should be perfectly straight down, and this got twisted when this impact happened. So as I'm pulling this dent out, it's actually moving this too, which is a really good sign because it means that once I get the dent out of the side of the car, it should pull this almost all the way back out to where it should be, and then the trunk can close without an issue. I've gotten a lot of the dent out here, but there's a few places where it's just not moving anymore, no matter how much I pound on it from the inside. There's a wrinkle right here, and a much more dramatic wrinkle right here. So I might have to cut a little bit to get this to move, but first I'm going to try the slide hammer again right on these spots, see if I can get them to move anymore. So other than that, the shape is pretty much coming back. This was all pushed in before, and it should basically be flat here and then taper to about here. So we're getting close. We're getting the rough shape back. So I'm going to weld the screw back on here and try to slide hammer again. Okay, so I've been slide hammering this for a while and going back at it with a pry bar again from behind, and it's just not moving at all. I think this ridge right here is making the areas around it really, really strong and locked into that position. And this is the worst of it right here, so I'm going to do the most extreme thing, and I'm going to actually just plunge a blade in here and cut right along this crease, and then try to straighten this out, and then hopefully I'll be able to get this area straightened out once this is more straightened out. But for now I'm just going to cut this here, try to pop this out, weld it back up, and then see what I can do about here. Want to see something horrifying? So I cut this back to get access to the inside of the panel, just because not being able to get to the back of the panel was one of my biggest problems. But it was actually kind of worth it. I've managed to get this curve back here. The general shape is back. Got the biggest dents out. There's still that one wrinkle that's giving me a hard time, and this panel is still kind of wavy. But if I can get these deeper dents out and massage out some of these more minor dents around here, I could get it where I only need a thin coat of body fill to get it to be smooth. It's not going to be absolutely perfect, and like I said, if I ever get the money, I'll take it into a body shop and have them redo it. But the important part is getting this flange and this angle back here, because this is where the bumper is going to have to fit around. And this I can hammer back in and weld back in when I'm done. But having access to the back of the panel is helping a lot, because I can actually get back here with hammers again and start hammering at those dents. And This one is still having a really hard time coming out, but it's starting to move now a little bit. I think that I was right and that this was giving it a lot of strength. And so by taking this out and getting this back into the right shape, this is starting to yield a little bit now. So hopefully I can ding this out. There's still a few areas here. Now I know any actual bodywork technicians are going to be looking at this and thinking that this is just complete butchery, and it is. But as long as I can get it back to a point where I'm not like putting on gobs and gobs of body fill, then I'm happy with that. So I haven't been filming this a whole lot, but that's because it's frustrating. It takes hours. This is filmed over multiple days, and I don't want to just run the camera showing me hammering over and over again. So I've gotten the general shape back. This is still like all lumpy and stuff, but this is pretty much the shape it should be. I've gotten this flange back. I had to cut some material out because the metal was really badly stretched because it was all wrinkled up here. But I got it back out roughly where the air side is, so the bumper should fit over it. I'm getting ready to weld this back on. This is just a flap I cut and pulled back so I can get access to the back, and then I'll paint the inside of that, weld it back. There's still some deep-ish dents here I'm having a hard time getting out. I can't really get the back to hammer them. I've been trying to use a slide hammer, and I've flattened them out a little bit, but it's been hours of using a slide hammer. This is just not moving at all. So I think I'm going to have to move on to filler. I'm going to stop for now, but the next thing I'm going to do is grind all of this back. Probably tap out some of the smaller dents I can get at. And then epoxy and filler. And then sand this smooth. I know like professional body guys could definitely get this a lot smoother than I have it right now. But this is as far as I'm getting right now. Oh, also some of the creases here, I've been filling them with weld, and so I'll fill that with more weld and grind it back smooth so I don't have such a deep body filler here. The good news though is that this won't move when I'm hitting it with a slide hammer, so it shouldn't move too much after I put the body fill on it, which I think is going to reduce the risk of cracking. If it does crack, then I'll have to come back and figure out something else, but for now we're just going to move on to fiberglass and fill. So now I'm moving on to filling, body filling. And when you talk about body fill and you go online, there's going to be a million different opinions. Some people say that you should put body fill directly against the metal. Some people say you should put an epoxy primer between it and the metal. Some people say you should fiberglass directly to the metal and then a primer that. And like, there's a whole bunch of different opinions. So I've chosen to do something to make everyone mad here. So first, grind back the metal to the point where it's shiny again. You want to go into the good paint just a little bit to make sure there's no hidden rust. And then I've cleaned it up with degreaser. Then I hit it with a rust converter. And I'm not doing this instead of removing all the rust. I'm doing this as well as removing all the rust because if I miss any or if there's tiny amounts I can't see, hopefully this will stop it. But don't rely on this. So take off as much as I can. Get it all shiny. Spray it with this. And I'm going to clean it up again. Or I cleaned it up again. And I've put 2-part metal epoxy over where I've welded and some of the deeper grooves here. It's going to bind really well to the metal. Hopefully it'll also bind to the filler. I've just covered this entire inside section here with it because I don't really care what this looks like. It just needs to be strong and not rust. So I'm not want to worry too much about that. Then I'm going to clean this up again. I'm going to hit this with some fiberglass and because there's some deeper wrinkles here I wasn't able to get out. Get that first because body fill should be very thin. And then I'm going to go over the top of that with a thin layer of body fill. You see these in all different colors. The colors don't really matter all that much by themselves. Like you can get blue cream hardener and green fiberglass. You can get red cream hardener. The color's just there to tell you when it's mixed. Because when you have an even color throughout, that's how you know it's mixed up properly. So I prefer to use the red with the green. The red hardener with the green fiberglass. Even though it makes this ugly brown color, it's very obvious that it's mixed up. If you use blue and blue, you know, in certain lighting conditions, it can be hard to tell if you've actually mixed it. So once the fiberglass has had a little bit to harden, you just sand it down. It doesn't need to be super pretty or good. The fiberglass is not the final step. There's going to be body fill over top of this. You just want to make sure that the fiberglass is down less than the depth of the steel surrounding it. So because fiberglass and primer and paint are going over top of this, you don't want this taller than everything else around it because it'll just make a bubble. So you just sand it back to make sure it's lower than all the highest points. You see wherever it hits steel here, I sanded more around it to get it deeper than everything around it, so that I can use the body fill to bring it up to an even level. So you don't need to be super fine with this at all. I've literally been using 100 grit sandpaper and an angle grinder with a flap disc to knock this down. And then now I'm going to go over this again with actual body fill, and that's where we're going to get into the more detail sanding. Okay, so after you get your body fill on and spread out and hardens, we enter what is known as the 10,000 years of sanding. It's going to be so much sanding. So you want to sand off the body fill as much as you can and make it even with the surrounding bodywork. So you want to bring back as much of the original bodywork as possible and only have the fill go in to fill low spots. I use 100 grit for this. You actually want to start with a low grit to shape and get all this out, and then we'll come back later with a higher grit just before we put on paint. Don't want to go too high grit because we are going to use a filling primer, but we will want to get these 100 grit scratches out before we put the primer on. So you'll see this metal shining through here. That's what we want, because these parts of the body are the height they should be, and we're just trying to fill the low spots between them. And you can't really see where the transition is, but if you feel with your eyes closed, if you can feel a ridge between any of these, then you're not done yet. If you can't feel it, if it's just a smooth transition all the way through, then these are perfectly even, and once you paint it, it's not going to show anymore. If the bodywork is still higher than the filler, you want to add more filler. If the filler is higher than the bodywork, you want to keep sanding. You're probably going to want to sand more than fill. You shouldn't have to keep filling large areas. As you can see, there's still a few areas here that need to be come back with later, but I come back with little amounts of filler there. I shouldn't ever have to refill this whole area again. Just come back and do little spots. This part up here hasn't been sanded at all, so you can see what this looks like. And this looks like it could use more filler, but it probably doesn't. So you want to sand it first before you try to put any more filler on, because this probably will come out smooth like down here. And if I put more filler on, that's just more filler I have to sand off. So I'm going to get back to sanding for the rest of my life. Okay, so after 10,000 hours of sanding, here we are. It all feels pretty level. There's still a little bit in here, but it's not quite perfect. But the point is, get it all level, get it all smooth. While you're doing this, you're going to be tempted to go and fill in spots that look low. Don't do that until you've sanded the whole thing, because those spots might not actually be low. They might be closer to being level. So sand the whole thing first before going back and adding any more. You should only have to go back and add more in a couple little spots, like you can see, like here, and a little bit here. But you want to try to bring it all back being level. You don't want this to be too thick. As you can see, there's some places here where the metal is showing through and some places where the fiberglass is showing through. That's good. You want as little fill as possible. You want this just to be a thin, smooth final coating. And then now I'm going to come over here with spot putty. The spot putty is just for these little itty-bitty imperfections like pinholes. You just work it in there, sand it off again, and then we'll go on to a filler primer. After 10,000 years of sanding, here we are. Got the shape back. It's all sanded out. It's not perfect. There are still a little bit of stuff that I didn't get out, but now it looks like a normal dent and not a crazy bashed in dent. And obviously you can see the edges of the paint here. This is because this is just primer. So I'm going to get a color matched paint to the car and then try to blend it out later. But that's for later. For now, I'm happy with it. It looks presentable. It looks like a car that can be driven. And I can move on to other stuff.